It started with a smirk, a headline, and a claim so bold it echoed through Washington like a thunderclap. Donald Trump stepped up to the microphones that morning, cameras flashing like lightning, and said with absolute confidence, "I have a 180 IQ, higher than Einstein, higher than Obama. I'm a very stable genius." The crowd laughed, some nervously, others out of disbelief. Reporters exchanged glances, their pens freezing midair. It wasn't the first time Trump had claimed extraordinary brilliance, but this one landed differently. It wasn't just arrogance, it was an open challenge to anyone who might dare question it. And in the quiet corners of Washington, someone was already listening. Barack Obama, calm as ever, was in Georgetown that morning, sipping coffee while reviewing policy papers. The news ticker on TV caught his attention. Trump's words rolled across the screen like satire, but Obama didn't laugh. He leaned back, watching, his face unreadable. For years, he had watched the chaos unfold, tweets, scandals, denials, but this time, something in Trump's tone was off. It wasn't just bragging, it was defiance, a need to prove something. And when a man in power feels the need to prove his genius, history tends to write the next line in tragedy, not triumph. Hours later, inside the Federal Health Office, a sealed envelope changed hands. It was marked confidential, cognitive assessment results, a routine evaluation that wasn't supposed to leave the building. But Washington's walls are thin, and secrets travel faster than light when ambition is involved. By nightfall, a copy of that file landed quietly on Obama's desk, slipped under the radar through a trusted contact. He opened it slowly, scanning the dense medical text, until one line made him pause. Results indicate mild cognitive impairment, further testing recommended. He read it twice, then once more. The man who bragged about being smarter than Einstein had a report suggesting cracks in his own mental clarity. Obama set the paper down and looked out the window at the quiet D.C. streets. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about stability, about truth. And somewhere deep down, he knew the public deserved to see what hid behind the curtain of that stable genius. Still, he said nothing. Not yet. Meanwhile, at the White House, Trump was glowing. The IQ claim had gone viral, millions of shares, trending hashtags, cheering rallies. Supporters treated it like gospel. "Our president, the smartest in history," one banner read. Inside the Oval Office, his aides laughed nervously, unsure whether to correct him or clap. Trump paced the room like a general preparing for war. "We're going to shut them all up," he said. "The fake news, the haters, they wish they had my brain." Then he leaned in close to his communications director. "Set up an interview. Prime time. I'll tell the world exactly how smart I am." That was the spark. By morning, talk shows replayed the claim on loop. Experts debated on air whether an IQ of 180 was even possible. Memes exploded. Late-night comedians had a field day. But beneath the laughter, something darker stirred, a quiet unease about a leader obsessed with his own intellect. And in Georgetown, Obama was reading the file again. His expression stayed calm, but his silence was heavy. He picked up the phone. "I need to meet someone," he said. That someone was an old contact, an analyst who once reviewed presidential health briefings. They met privately in a small cafe, the kind where conversations dissolve into background noise. Obama slid the file across the table. "Tell me what this means," he said. The man adjusted his glasses, scanned the lines, and exhaled. It means the results weren't catastrophic, but they weren't clean either. It's not dementia, not yet, but if ignored," he hesitated, "it could become something that affects judgment, attention, memory, especially under stress." Obama's gaze was steady. "And this report? Was there follow-up testing?" The analyst shook his head. "No, sir, it was buried." Obama didn't reply. He just nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical thing. That night, he sat alone with the file open beside a dim lamp. Trump's words from that morning echoed in his mind. I'm a very stable genius. The irony cut deep. The man bragging about mental superiority might be losing the very thing he was proudest of. Obama closed the folder. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. But he understood something fundamental. This wasn't about humiliating Trump. It was about protecting a nation from a truth it wasn't ready to face. And so he waited, quietly, patiently, because truth, he knew, has a way of finding daylight on its own. The first whispers appeared online 3 days later. An unnamed source, a medical document, a headline that read, "Leaked report questions president's cognitive health." Cable news pounced. The Atlantic ran an exposé. CNN replayed every slip of Trump's speech, every ramble, every repetition. Twitter caught fire. Trump exploded. "Fake news," he shouted at reporters, waving papers, red-faced. "These so-called doctors are Democrats. Total lies. I passed every test with flying colors." But the damage was done. For the first time, the public began to wonder if the president's wild claims weren't just personality quirks, but symptoms of something deeper. And as the storm grew, Obama stayed silent, watching, waiting, knowing that sometimes the most devastating truth isn't shouted, it's revealed, slowly, when the lies can no longer hold. The morning after the story broke, Washington woke up different. News anchors spoke in half-whispers, trying to sound calm while every network fought for scraps of the same secret. Was the President of the United States mentally unfit? Outside the White House, cameras lined the gates. Inside, chaos had a new name: damage control. Trump's communications room was a storm of ringing phones and raised voices. "Shut it down," one aide yelled. "Find out who leaked it," another demanded. Trump stood at the center, pacing, gripping his phone like a weapon. "Fake report, fake people, Obama's behind it, I know it," he barked. He opened X, what used to be Twitter, and typed furiously. "Leaked cognitive test story totally false. I'm the smartest person in the room, always have been, ask anyone." Within minutes, it had 5 million impressions. His supporters cheered, his critics laughed, and somewhere in Georgetown, Barack Obama quietly switched off the TV. He knew what was coming. At noon, Press Secretary Daniels faced the reporters. "The president is in perfect health," she said, forcing a smile. "He recently took a cognitive assessment and passed with a perfect score." The questions flew like bullets. Can you release the results? Who conducted the test? Is it true a neurologist raised concerns about memory lapses? Daniels dodged them all. Next question. But you can't plug holes in a dam that's already cracked. Within hours, anonymous staffers confirmed the leaks were real. The document existed. The line "mild cognitive impairment" was authentic. The internet didn't sleep that night. Every clip of Trump repeating himself, losing words, slurring, was suddenly recut into montages with ominous music. "A very stable genius," the captions read. Irony became proof. And through it all, Obama remained silent. No statements, no interviews, just calm observation while the country unraveled in slow motion. By the third day, protests started forming outside the White House. Some demanded transparency. Others carried signs that read, "Hands off our president." Cable pundits debated not policy, but neurology. Trump's fury boiled. "They think I'm sick. I'll show them sick," he shouted to his aides. "Schedule a rally, tonight." That evening in Orlando, the crowd gathered by the tens of thousands. Red hats, flags, chanting. The stage lights cut through the humid air as Trump emerged, chest out, grin wide. "Fake news says your favorite president can't think straight," he began. The crowd booed on cue. "But I took that test, passed every question. They ask, what's similar about a grape and an orange? I said, they're both fruit. Perfect answer." Laughter erupted, but something felt off. His rhythm stumbled. He repeated lines, lost his place, glanced at the teleprompter, then joked, "See, I was testing you." The crowd forced another cheer, but the clip told a different story. Within hours, it was viral. Trump loses track mid-speech, calls it a test. Obama watched the video that night alone in his study. For the first time, he looked tired, not from politics, but from empathy. He'd spent years warning about truth and accountability, and now both were unfolding in front of him like a slow-motion collision. He whispered to himself, "Truth always finds daylight." The next morning, Obama finally broke his silence. He agreed to a brief sit-down interview. No theatrics, no anger, just measured calm. He looked straight into the camera and said, "This isn't about politics, it's about honesty. Every American deserves a leader who can answer hard questions without turning them into enemies." The words landed like a verdict. They weren't loud, but they cut through every headline. His tone wasn't mocking, it was surgical, and that made it lethal. Trump's response came within minutes, another all-caps post. "Obama jealous, can't stand my IQ, sad." But the tide was turning. Even some loyal voices in conservative media began to whisper doubts. The nation's attention shifted from laughter to worry. Then came the whistleblower. Her name was Dr. Elise Warren, a neurologist who had once worked on the president's medical team. She appeared live on primetime television, eyes steady, voice composed. "I didn't leak this to hurt anyone," she said. "I leaked it because the public deserves the truth." She confirmed the document was authentic. The test results had indeed shown cognitive inconsistencies, and no follow-up evaluation was ever performed. The room fell silent. The host blinked. The country stopped scrolling for 5 full seconds. Supporters called her a traitor. Others called her a hero. But no one could unhear what she had said. Her calm honesty hit deeper than any political speech. And somewhere across town, Obama switched off the TV again. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just exhaled. Because the truth he'd been waiting for had finally stepped into the light. That night, the White House felt colder. Trump's aides whispered outside the Oval Office, afraid to enter. He was sitting behind his desk, staring at the same headline over and over. "Doctor confirms leaked report is real." He muttered, almost to himself, "They'll pay for this, all of them." But beneath the anger, something unfamiliar flickered, doubt. For a brief moment, even he seemed to realize that the storm he mocked had become a hurricane he couldn't control. And in that silence, the walls of Washington seemed to close in just a little tighter. By dawn, America was split in two. Half the country was shouting fake news. The other half was whispering, "What if it's real?" Every screen, every radio show, every podcast echoed with one question: is the president mentally fit to lead? Washington ran on panic. Inside the West Wing, aides spoke in code, terrified of being the next leak. Loyalty had turned into fear, and fear turned into silence. No one trusted anyone. Even the walls seemed to be listening. Trump barely slept. He spent the nights pacing, replaying news clips of Dr. Elise Warren's testimony. Her calm voice haunted him. The public deserves the truth. He slammed his desk. "She doesn't know truth. I am the truth," he yelled, sending papers flying. But the truth didn't care about volume. It had already escaped. Outside, the protests grew louder. Chants of "Release the records" mixed with "We stand with Trump." Washington turned into a battlefield of words and conviction. Everyone had an opinion. No one had answers. Cable networks ran the same footage on repeat. Trump's Orlando rally, his stumbles, the leaked report highlights. Analysts debated whether the behavior was a symptom or just ego unchecked. For once, even late-night comedians stopped joking. The laughter had run out. Meanwhile, Barack Obama kept his routine calm and precise. Every morning, he'd walk through his study, coffee in hand, scanning updates without reaction. To the public, he said almost nothing. To those who knew him, his silence said everything. Behind the scenes, he met privately with a few trusted voices. Former intelligence heads, medical advisors, even one old Republican friend who had served under a previous administration. He wasn't plotting revenge. He was assessing risk. Because this wasn't just about Trump's pride anymore. It was about national security. A world leader under cognitive decline wasn't just a headline. It was a danger. Obama listened more than he spoke. Finally, after one particularly tense briefing, he said quietly, "If this continues, the truth won't just expose him. It'll expose us all, how much we let slide." The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was right. By the fifth day, the White House communications team released a new strategy: full offense. Trump would hold a press conference, live, no teleprompter. The idea was to prove he was fine, strong, and sharp. What could possibly go wrong? The press room was packed, reporters, cameras, flashing lights. Trump walked in, chin high, defiance in every step. He began with confidence. "You see, the fake media wants you to think I'm losing it, but look at me, I'm sharper than ever." He pointed at a journalist. "You, ask me anything." The reporter hesitated, then asked, "Mr. President, can you recall the 5 words used in your cognitive test?" Trump blinked. "Of course I can. It was tree, person, woman, TV, and wait, you know what? Doesn't matter. I passed perfectly." Laughter rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in. He felt it, the sting of mockery. The same laughter he'd once fed on, now cut like glass. He snapped back. "You people are disgusting. You'd rather see America fail than see me win." And with that, he stormed off the podium, leaving the press in chaos. That clip became the headline of the week. President walks out mid-question, refuses to finish memory test answer. For millions watching, it wasn't politics anymore. It was sadness. That night, in a small DC studio, Obama was invited to comment live. He didn't attack, he didn't mock. He just sighed and said, "Power isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's about having the humility to admit when you're not." The words were quiet, but hit like thunder. Within minutes, the quote was everywhere, plastered on every screen, trending across every platform. Trump saw it too. His hand tightened around his phone. "Humility," he muttered. "That's weakness." He fired off another post. "Obama's talking again, still jealous, still irrelevant. My brain's bigger than his ego." But for the first time, even his followers hesitated. The joke was getting old. The bravado felt forced. Something had shifted. Back in Georgetown, Obama's advisors urged him to stay quiet. "Sir, let this play out." But Obama knew silence had limits. There's a moment when leadership demands more than patience. It demands presence. So he drafted a speech, not a press statement, a national address. Calm, measured, honest. He didn't plan to mention Trump by name. He didn't need to. The truth already had a face. As the world waited, Trump stewed in his fury. He called his doctor, demanding a new report. "Write something official. Say I'm fine. Say I'm the sharpest man alive." The doctor hesitated. "Sir, I can't falsify records." Trump cut him off. "You want to keep your job?" The line went silent. Meanwhile, Dr. Elise Warren went into hiding. Death threats, constant harassment, security escorts. She had lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Yet she never retracted her statement. When asked if she regretted it, she said softly, "The truth shouldn't need protection, but right now, it does." Those words resonated. Obama read them in the morning papers and felt something shift again, a signal that this wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about America's relationship with truth itself. By the week's end, the White House was a fortress under siege. Staff members resigned quietly. Senators whispered about invoking the 25th Amendment, though none dared to say it publicly. And in the midst of the noise, Trump did what he always did when cornered. He doubled down. He scheduled another rally, another stage, another crowd. Because if there was one thing Donald Trump understood better than politics, it was performance. And the show, in his mind, wasn't over yet. The rally in Phoenix was meant to be a comeback. Trump wanted to prove he still had control, still had energy, still had that fire. He arrived backstage to roaring cheers and flashing lights, the sound feeding him like oxygen. But something about his eyes was different that night. Wild, searching, uncertain. "Let's show them who's boss," he muttered as the music blared. He stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. Cameras zoomed in, flags waved. The crowd chanted his name like a mantra. For a moment, it worked. The familiar rhythm returned. The performance lived. Then, halfway through his speech, the rhythm cracked. He stumbled on a sentence, then another. He lost his place in the teleprompter and ad-libbed nonsense, looping the same phrases. "We're doing great things, incredible things. People say, 'Sir, how do you remember all these things?' And I tell them, because I'm very something." A nervous laugh rolled through the crowd. He smiled, pretending it was a joke. "See, I was testing you again." But the illusion was breaking. His words started to drift, names mixed up, dates twisted, numbers reversed. Then he caught sight of the front row, reporters scribbling notes, cameras pointed straight at him. His voice rose. "You fake people, you twist everything I say." The cheer that followed was loud but hollow. It sounded like denial echoing through a stadium. By the next morning, every outlet replayed the clip. "President appears disoriented during speech." The words "cognitive decline" trended again, this time worldwide. And in Washington, the panic spread from the media to the markets. Confidence shook, the dollar dipped. Allies called privately, asking what was happening in America. In Georgetown, Obama sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass. He'd seen leaders fall before, but never like this. Never in public, never live. He wasn't celebrating, he was mourning what politics had become. That afternoon, he finalized the speech he'd been writing for days. It wasn't about Trump anymore. It was about the country, about the sickness that spreads when ego replaces truth. At 8 p.m. sharp, the networks cut to Barack Obama, live from a modest podium, with no flags, no grand music, just him. Calm, centered. He began softly. "In our history, we've faced wars, recessions, divisions. But our strength was never measured by the loudest voice in the room. It was measured by our capacity for truth." He paused. You could hear the silence across living rooms nationwide. Leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to admit them. Because when power becomes a shield against accountability, the nation pays the price. He never said Trump's name. He didn't need to. Everyone knew. We all love this country, but loving it means facing reality, even when it's uncomfortable. It means caring about the future more than pride. The broadcast lasted 9 minutes. When it ended, the anchors were speechless, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. For the first time in months, the country went quiet. Even Trump's allies paused. Some called it dignified. Others called it a setup. But everyone knew something had changed. Obama hadn't attacked. He had reminded. And that reminder was more dangerous than any accusation. Trump's reaction came within minutes. He was watching live from the residence, pacing, furious. "Cut his feed, cut it," he shouted at no one in particular. "He thinks he's better than me. He's not. I'll prove it." He demanded to address the nation himself. His aides begged him to rest. "Not tonight, sir. Let the moment pass." But Donald Trump never let moments pass. He seized them, even if they burned him. "Get me the cameras," he ordered. An hour later, the White House press office scrambled to set up an emergency address. No teleprompter, no prepared remarks, just Trump behind the resolute desk, angry and unfiltered. He began with a smirk. "They say I'm not all there. Well, look at me. I'm here. I'm sharp. I remember everything." His tone shifted. "Obama, yeah, he was talking about truth. I'll tell you about truth. The truth is, they've been after me since day one because I'm smarter than them, smarter than everyone." His voice cracked. The words came faster, louder, slipping into rants about loyalty, enemies, betrayal. It stopped sounding presidential and started sounding desperate. For the first time, even his supporters watching at home felt uneasy. The fire that once energized them now looked like something else, something unstable. He ended abruptly. "They call it decline," he said, staring into the camera. "I call it being human. You don't like it? Tough." He stood up before the feed cut, leaving viewers stunned in silence. That moment broke something in the American psyche. People didn't cheer or jeer. They just paused. Because beneath the defiance, there was something they hadn't seen before: fragility. A man finally cracking under the weight of his own legend. Obama watched quietly from his study. When the feed ended, he turned off the television and whispered to himself, "Maybe that's the beginning." Because sometimes collapse isn't destruction, it's revelation. The next morning, the White House was in crisis mode again. Staffers whispered about the president's state. Advisors drafted letters of resignation. Cabinet members privately discussed succession protocols. But outside those walls, the nation began to change tone. Anger gave way to exhaustion. Division gave way to reflection. People weren't arguing anymore. They were wondering how things had gotten this far. The headlines stopped asking who leaked it. They started asking, what do we do now? And in that shift, Obama saw the faintest glimmer of hope, the kind that comes only after truth scorches everything else to ash. By the next week, the roar of politics had turned into a low, uneasy hum. The rallies slowed, the shouting softened. The air in Washington felt different, like a storm had passed, leaving debris and silence behind. Inside the White House, the lights burned later than ever. The staff was smaller now. Half had resigned. The rest were waiting for orders that never came. The man who once demanded loyalty above all else now sat alone, surrounded by silence. Trump's phone was on the desk, blank screen glowing in the dark. No tweets, no posts, just the reflection of a tired face staring back at him. For the first time in years, there was no one left to argue with, no one left to convince, no one left to believe the myth more than he did himself. He picked up the same leaked report that had started it all, the one marked mild cognitive impairment. He read it again, lips moving slowly over the words, as if trying to make them mean something else. "They call it decline," he whispered. "I call it being human." And for once, the words didn't sound like defiance. They sounded like confession. Across the city, Barack Obama walked through the quiet corridors of the National Archives. He had been invited to record a message about leadership and legacy. Cameras followed him as he moved between exhibits: the Constitution, the Emancipation Proclamation, old letters written by men who carried nations on their shoulders. He stopped before a glass case holding a faded speech by Abraham Lincoln. The inscription read, "We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." Obama read it softly to himself and smiled sadly. Because he understood, the hardest lies to confront are the ones people tell about themselves. When the cameras rolled, his tone was quiet, reflective. "History doesn't remember our IQs," he said. "It remembers what we did when truth challenged our pride." He looked directly into the lens. Sometimes leadership isn't about winning the argument. It's about listening long enough to realize you were wrong, and being brave enough to say it. He didn't need to mention names. America already knew who the message was for. But it wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about everyone watching. Because, as he said next, when power becomes more about proving your worth than serving others, the nation starts to lose its way. That clip went viral within minutes. It wasn't angry, it wasn't partisan, it was human. People shared it not to debate, but to reflect. For the first time in months, America wasn't laughing, shouting, or fighting. It was thinking. Meanwhile, Dr. Elise Warren resurfaced, not for fame or vindication, but to testify before a congressional committee about ethical transparency in presidential health. Her voice trembled at first, but her conviction didn't. "I didn't come forward to hurt anyone," she said. "I did it because truth is the only thing that keeps power honest." Her testimony became another spark in a quiet movement, one pushing for reform, for checks, for something that could prevent the next crisis before it started. Back in Florida, Trump retreated to his Mar-a-Lago estate. The cameras followed him less now. The world had moved on. He still held small events, still talked about comebacks, still claimed brilliance, but the words didn't carry the same weight. Even his closest supporters looked at him differently. They still cheered, but softer, slower, as if cheering for what used to be, not what was. Some nights, he'd sit alone on the patio, scrolling through old tweets, old headlines, old clips of rallies where the crowd's roar made him feel invincible. But now, the silence that followed each memory lingered longer. The applause had faded, the spotlight had moved, and all that was left was the man behind the myth. He once called himself a stable genius. Now, he rarely used the word genius at all. In Georgetown, Obama gave one final interview months later. The host asked him what he thought about the scandal now that time had passed. He smiled faintly. "The truth is, every leader believes they're the hero of their own story, but history decides that part for us." He paused, then added, "I don't think America was ever broken. I think it was just confused. Confused between confidence and arrogance, between honesty and performance." The interviewer leaned forward. "And what about Trump?" Obama took a long breath. "He's a reflection," he said quietly. "Every society eventually meets a mirror. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary, because only when we see the cracks can we start fixing what's underneath." The clip went viral again, not for controversy, but for clarity. Across the nation, people replayed that final line. Every society eventually meets a mirror. And for once, it wasn't about sides. It was about truth. Because in the end, that's what the entire story had been about. Not Trump, not Obama, not politics, but truth. How it hides, how it fights, and how, when it finally breaks through, it doesn't roar. It whispers. And that whisper, once heard, never leaves you. By year's end, the noise had faded completely. The world had moved on to new arguments, new scandals, new distractions. But somewhere deep in America's memory, this story remained. The tale of a boast that became a lesson, of a test that revealed more than intelligence ever could, and of two men, one chasing validation, the other defending truth, caught in the same storm, each proving that brilliance means nothing without honesty. When Trump bragged about having a 180 IQ, the world laughed. But when the truth finally caught up, no one was laughing anymore. Because in the end, it wasn't about IQ. It was about integrity. And in that test, history already chose who passed.